The frost had come early that year, settling over the frontier like a warning. Even at dawn, the air held the kind of cold that bit through wool and leather, stealing breath and stiffening joints. Elias Hart, riding his bay mare along the burned-out trail, felt every degree of it press into his bones. He had been a soldier far too long to complain. But the silence along the valley unsettled him in a way the cold never could. 3 days earlier, a trading post along the canyon had gone up in flames. Another mysterious strike pinned on the Black Ridge Brotherhood, though no one had seen them. Command had ordered patrols to sweep the outer ridges for survivors or evidence. Most soldiers rode in pairs, but Elias had volunteered to take the northern route alone. Men called it loneliness. He considered it clarity. The fog hung thick over the creek bed as his mare splashed through the shallow water. The world felt muffled, soundless, airless. That was why the faint noise reached him so sharply, a cry, or what might have once been one. Elias halted, every instinct tightening. He listened. At first, nothing. Then again, a thin, unraveling whisper carried faintly on the frozen air. Not an animal. Not wind. Human. He dismounted quickly, hand resting on the butt of his rifle but not yet drawing it. The creek bent sharply around a bank of broken stones and fallen branches. Somewhere beyond it, the weak voice resurfaced, trembling between desperation and surrender. Please. No, just finish it. Elias stepped over the stones, scanning the ground with slow, careful sweeps. The fog parted enough to reveal a shape curled against the base of a dead cottonwood. A person, draped in torn winter clothing, half buried in silt and frost. A woman. He approached cautiously, kneeling beside her. Her skin was drained of color, lips split from cold, breath shallow enough to nearly stop. Her dark hair hung in matted strands across her face. She tried to lift her head, but it fell back against the trunk before she could form another word. You're safe, Elias said, though he wasn't sure that was true. I'm not here to hurt you. Her eyelids fluttered weakly. Her voice came as a rasp, each word scraping out with effort. Don't. Take me back, please. Please just end it now. Elias felt a bolt of alarm, not at her plea, but at the terror behind it. This wasn't a woman lost or cold. This was someone fleeing something far worse. He slid off his gloves and checked her hands. Swollen, scraped, shaking with cold. Her pulse trembled under his fingertips. She was badly dehydrated, half-frozen, and likely injured. He had no time to waste. I need to look for wounds, he said. Just hold still. She didn't resist as he gently lifted the edge of her ragged coat, expecting bruises or bleeding. Instead, what he saw made his breath leave him in a quiet, involuntary exhale, burned into the flesh along her ribs, swollen, inflamed, unmistakable, was a brand. A symbol shaped like interlocking ridges and a downward claw. Elias had seen it only once before. In a sealed report meant for officers, the mark used by the Black Ridge Brotherhood to identify escapees they wanted tracked. And silenced, his jaw clenched. Whoever this woman was, she was not supposed to be alive. He lowered her coat carefully, fighting the urge to look over his shoulder into the fog. They could already be close. What's your name? He asked. She didn't open her eyes. Doesn't matter. They'll kill me anyway. Not if I get you out of here, Elias said, lifting her gently into his arms. For the first time, she didn't argue. Whether from trust or exhaustion, he didn't know. But as he carried her toward his horse, Elias felt the weight of the brand more heavily than he felt her body. Someone had marked her as prey, and that meant the hunters couldn't be far behind. Elias laid the woman across his saddle, as gently as he could, careful not to press against the scorched flesh beneath her coat. Even unconscious, she winced at the slightest movement. That brand wasn't old. The edges were still raised, the skin angry and raw, days old at best. Whoever burned it into her wasn't far. He secured her with a wool blanket from his saddlebag, then swung himself up behind her. His horse shifted nervously, ears flicking at something invisible in the fog. Ilias felt it too, a pressure in the air, a sense of being watched. The Brotherhood was infamous for its silence, its ability to surround a place without a single snap twig. He nudged the mare forward, keeping to the creek bed where the water masked tracks. Every few yards he glanced over his shoulder. The fog thickened behind him like a closing curtain. They traveled for nearly an hour before he reached the narrow pass that led toward his outpost, a rough cabin tucked into the ridge where he kept supplies and shelter between patrols. No other soldier used it. The trail was too steep for mule teams and too remote for usefulness. It made a perfect place to hide her and a difficult place to defend. He dismounted and checked her vitals again. Her breathing had stabilized but remained shallow. He brushed a strand of hair from her face, revealing cheeks red with fever. "Stay with me," he murmured. Though she slept too deeply to hear, he carried her inside the cabin, lowering her onto the narrow cot beside the stove. He started a fire immediately, feeding it until the flames crackled strong enough to chase the cold out of the wooden walls. Only once warmth began to replace the icy air did she stir. Her eyes opened, wide, wild, filled with the raw panic of a cornered animal. She tried to shove herself upright, but her limbs failed her. She collapsed back, gasping as though waking from a nightmare only to find herself in another. "Easy," Ilias said, holding his hands up where she could see them. "You're safe. You were freezing to death when I found you." She blinked rapidly, as if trying to decide whether he was real. Where am?" "My outpost. Hidden. No one knows about it unless I tell them." Her gaze swept the small room, the single window, the rifle rack, the rough-hewn table. When her eyes returned to him, they held a mix of suspicion and exhaustion. "You should have left me," she whispered. "They'll come. They always come." "Who?" Ilias asked, though he already knew. The brand had told him more than she realized. She didn't answer. Instead, she curled away from him, pulling the blanket tight around her ribs. The movement lifted the edge of her coat again, and Ilias caught a glimpse of the burned symbol. He forced himself not to react visibly. He couldn't let her see the shock he felt or the anger. Not at her, but at the Brotherhood, gritting his teeth. He rose and poured water into a tin cup to warm over the fire. "You need to drink before anything else. After that, I'll treat the burn." At the word burn, her entire body tensed. She kept her gaze on the wall, refusing to look at him. "They marked you," Ilias said quietly. "I saw it. You don't have to explain yet, but I need to know if there's more." A tremor ran through her. "That mark means I'm already dead." Her voice was a thin thread of sound, barely holding together. Ilias shook his head. "Not while I'm breathing." She finally met his eyes then, searching, testing whether he meant it. After a long moment, something in her expression softened, though fear still clung to her like frost. "You don't understand," she whispered. "They don't let anyone escape. Not ever." Ilias set the cup beside her and reached for his coat and rifle. "That's why I need to check the trail," he said, "to see how close they are." She swallowed hard. "You shouldn't go alone. I always do." He stepped outside into the biting wind, and there, in the snow leading to his door, were fresh tracks, too many to count, and arranged in a formation that froze the breath in his lungs. The Brotherhood wasn't coming. They were already here. The tracks in the snow were arranged with the precision of men trained to hunt. Ilias crouched, brushing his glove over the impressions, deep-heeled strikes, wide spacing, the marks of men moving quickly but silently. At least 6 of them, maybe more. They'd approached the cabin from the ridge, not the trail, which meant they knew exactly where he lived. A warning? No, a promise. Elias stood slowly, scanning the tree line. The fog had thinned, leaving long gray shadows between the pines. Nothing moved. Nothing breathed. But the tracks were fresh, no more than an hour old. The same time he'd been tending to the woman. Either they had followed him here, or they had gotten here first and were waiting for him to lead them straight to her. He stepped back inside the cabin, closing the door quietly. The woman, still wrapped tightly in the blanket, watched him with wide, fearful eyes. She didn't need to ask. Something in his expression told her everything. "They're out there," she whispered. "Yes." She closed her eyes, sinking deeper into the cot as though hoping it would swallow her. "Then kill me now, please. It's better than what they'll do if they find me." Elias stiffened, the words striking him harder than the cold outside. "I'm not killing you. You don't understand. Then make me understand." Her breathing quickened. She shook her head once, slow and hollow. "You can't protect me from them." Elias knelt beside the cot. "What's your name?" She hesitated, as though offering it meant surrendering a part of herself she couldn't replace. Finally, "Marin." "Marin." "Look at me." She didn't. Not until he placed a steady warm hand near hers, not touching, but close enough for her to feel the heat. Those tired eyes lifted to his. "You're safe here," Elias said. "And you're not dying." "Not today." Marin's lips trembled. She opened her mouth as if to speak, but instead she curled forward, clutching her side. A low cry slipped out before she bit down to silence it. "The burn is infected," Elias murmured. "It doesn't matter," she rasped. "Nothing matters. They branded me because I wasn't supposed to leave alive. I overheard something. I shouldn't have. They said they'd hunt me down wherever I ran." Elias absorbed her words carefully, noting each crack in her voice, each shard of fear. "What did you hear?" He asked. She recoiled as if struck. "No, I won't say it. If I speak it out loud, it becomes real." Elias didn't push. Not yet. He rose and fetched his small medical kit from the shelf. Marin tensed when she saw it. "Don't," she whispered. "Just let it be. You'll get a fever if I don't treat it. And fever will kill you faster than they will." For a long moment, Marin sat frozen in conflict, fear of the Brotherhood warring with the instinct to survive. Finally, she let her head fall back against the cot, eyes closed. "Fine," she whispered. "But don't look too long." Elias approached slowly, as though nearing a spooked animal. He peeled away the coat and blanket from her left side. Marin sucked in a tight breath and gripped the cot's edge until her knuckles whitened. The brand stared back at him, swollen, blistered, carved into her skin with brutal purpose. The symbol of Black Ridge cut deep, as though the man who burned it wanted it visible even through clothing. Elias cleaned the area with warmed water, careful not to touch raw edges. Marin clenched her jaw so hard he feared her teeth might crack. Only when he applied salve did she breathe out a long, shuddering gasp. "You've seen it before," she whispered. "Yes." He didn't lie. "They only give that mark to those who know too much. I figured." Marin opened her eyes. They glistened with a terrible truth. "You shouldn't be helping me. They'll kill you." 2. Elias bandaged the wound, tied it gently, and rose. "I'm not planning on letting them." He moved to the window and eased the curtain aside. The fog had lifted completely now. And between the trees, half hidden in the shadows, a black-cloaked figure watched the cabin, still, silent, waiting. Elias' hand tightened around his rifle. The hunt had already begun. The figure between the pines didn't move, didn't flinch, didn't even pretend to hide. A sentinel, placed there not to strike, but to let Elias know he was already surrounded. A message delivered without a single word. Elias lowered the curtain slowly, jaw tightening. He wasn't easily rattled, but the Brotherhood's boldness meant they were confident. Or desperate. Behind him, Marin sat upright despite her pain. "You saw one, didn't you?" Elias didn't answer immediately. He checked the rifle, slid a fresh cartridge into the chamber, and set it beside the window. Only then did he turn toward her. "There's a man in the trees," he said quietly. "Just one, watching. One means many," she whispered. "I know." She pulled the blanket tighter around herself, her fingers trembling. Her posture changed, less like a frightened runaway, more like someone preparing for something she'd hoped never to face again. "You should leave me. They want me, not you." "That's not happening," Elias said. "You don't understand. I don't need to." His voice was calm but unshakable. "I don't turn people over to butchers." Marin's eyes glistened, but she didn't argue again. Elias suspected it wasn't trust, it was resignation. She had likely begged others before, only for them to surrender her too easily. She expected him to do the same eventually. He hoped to prove her wrong. He crossed the room, grabbed his field pack, and pulled out a small spyglass. A quick sweep through the window revealed what he already suspected: 2 more figures positioned along the ridge, barely distinguishable among the branches. The Brotherhood never attacked in daylight. They studied, stalked, waited. They exhausted prey before killing it. "Why aren't they coming in?" Elias murmured. Marin answered without lifting her head. "Because they think I'm weak. They think fear will make me run. And then they'll take me alive." Her voice cracked on the last word. Elias exhaled slowly. He'd fought tribes, bandits, deserters, but the Brotherhood was something different. They didn't crave power or territory. They thrived on silence, secrecy, and fear. Rumors said every one of them had once been a soldier. Men who disappeared from forts without explanation. Men trained to be ghosts. He would not win by brute force. "Not out here." "Marin," he said, "how long were you with them?" She swallowed hard. "Too long. Days. Maybe weeks. I lost count, and you escaped." "I didn't escape," she whispered. "They dragged me out to the ridge one night. Said they were done with me. I heard something I shouldn't have, something about a plan. I don't remember all of it. Just pieces. Then they branded me. I think they planned to leave me for dead, but someone argued. They fought. I ran while they were distracted." Elias pictured the scene, a heated argument among men who rarely disagreed, long enough for a half-starved woman to flee into the dark. It meant their plan, whatever it was, mattered enough to cause division. "And they need you back," Elias said slowly. "Not just to kill you, to stop you." Marin closed her eyes. "They want to know what I remember. And if they think I remember too much, they'll make sure no one else ever hears it." Elias rose, pacing once, twice, measuring the danger in each step. "We can't stay here. By nightfall, this place will be surrounded." Marin's breath hitched. "I can't run again. I can barely move. I'll carry you if I have to." Her eyes widened at the certainty in his voice. "Why?" she whispered. Elias paused at the door, gripping the handle, listening to the faint crunch of snow outside, distant footsteps shifting positions. "Because you're a human being," he said. "And because men like them don't get to decide who lives and who dies." He blew out the lantern to hide their silhouettes and began packing supplies with swift, efficient movements. The Brotherhood watched from the trees, but Elias' heart had no intention of letting them close in, not tonight. Not ever. The escape would begin before the sun went down. Elias worked quickly, pulling tins of food, spare cartridges, a compass, blankets, and a coil of rope into a single pack. Every movement was quiet, deliberate. Marin watched him with haunted eyes, her fingers clutching the edge of the cot as though letting go would send her back into the Fade Brotherhood's hands. "You're certain they won't strike before dark?" he asked without looking up. "They don't like uncertain fights," Marin whispered. "They prefer corners, traps, fear." She shivered even though the fire behind her still glowed. "They'll wait until you're tired, until the cold slows you, until you stop trusting your own senses." Elias shot a glance toward the window. "Then they'll be disappointed." Marin didn't smile. Instead, she pressed a palm over her bandaged side, wincing. The brand pulsed red beneath the gauze. Elias could see the fever creeping in. It added urgency he didn't voice aloud. He knelt beside her. "Before we head out, I need to know what I'm up against and what they're willing to kill for. What exactly did you overhear?" A long silence stretched between them. The wind outside scraped against the window frame like a warning. Marin's breath stuttered unevenly. "I don't remember all of it," she finally said, her voice trembling. "I was hardly conscious most of the time. They kept campfires few and far away. They whispered more than they spoke." "But you heard something," Elias pressed gently. Marin nodded weakly. "3 nights before I escaped. They thought I was asleep." Her gaze drifted toward the fire as though watching old memories in the flames. "They were arguing. The younger one, I think his name was Jarrell, said it was too dangerous, that the plan would turn the entire territory into chaos." Elias absorbed every detail, every name. "The leader?" he asked. Her expression tightened. "Garrow." Elias's jaw clenched. He'd heard the name whispered in barracks. A deserter. A strategist. A man who didn't kill for pleasure, but for purpose. What were they planning? Elias murmured. Marin closed her eyes, brow furrowing as she fought through the fog in her mind. "I remember." Her breath faltered. "I remember Garrow saying something about uniforms." "Uniforms?" Elias frowned. "Yes, and timing. Something about a supply caravan that delivers clothing and weapons to Fort Harrow at the end of winter, they said. They said if they got inside the walls disguised, the soldiers wouldn't know until it was too late." Elias's blood ran cold. Fort Harrow was one of the largest outposts in the territory, holding nearly 200 soldiers. An infiltration could lead to a massacre. "You're telling me they planned to enter the fort as friendly traders or supply men?" Marin nodded. "I think so. I'm not sure. I only caught pieces before one of them noticed I was awake." "And then?" Elias asked softly. Marin's face drained of color. "Then they dragged me out of camp. They said I'd heard enough to ruin everything. And Garrow ordered them to brand me so they could track me even in the dark." She swallowed hard, tears catching in her eyelashes. "After that, everything was pain, fire, and footsteps. I ran because dying alone in the woods felt kinder than dying in their hands." Elias's throat tightened. He hadn't expected her to speak so openly. "Not after what she'd endured. You survived," he murmured. "That counts for something." Marin shook her head. "No. All it means is they'll come harder now. Garrow can't risk me speaking." Elias set a hand on the cot's edge, not touching her, but anchoring her with his presence. "Then we speak first. We get you to the nearest garrison. Your memories, even scattered, could save hundreds of lives." She stared at him, disbelief slowly shifting into something fragile and uncertain. "Hope? Maybe." Elias stood and tightened the straps on his pack. "We leave in minutes." "Can you walk?" Marin nodded, though her legs trembled even sitting. "Good," Elias said, helping her rise carefully. "Because whatever Garrow has planned, we're not giving him the night." Outside. The forest was too quiet. Too still. The Brotherhood was waiting. And Elias' heart meant to slip through their teeth before they could bite. They left the cabin just as the last streaks of daylight bled into gray. Elias supported most of Murren's weight, her arms slung over his shoulder as they navigated the narrow path snaking behind the outpost. The snow was thin here, softened by the warmth from the rock face, making their tracks lighter, harder to follow. But the Brotherhood didn't need tracks. They needed only patience. Maren stumbled as they rounded the bend, and Elias tightened his hold. Steady. I'm trying, she whispered, breath fogging in faint bursts. Fever clung to her like a second skin, stealing strength faster than the cold ever could. Elias paused long enough to check her forehead. Hot. Too hot. He had medicine, but nothing to break an infection this severe. They had to move. The longer they lingered, the less her chances became. Only a little farther, he said. Once we reach the old trapper's tunnel, they'll lose sight of us. Maren nodded weakly. They continued slowly, quietly. Then the woods exhaled, a sound like snow sliding off a branch. Soft, delicate. Almost harmless. Elias knew better. Down. He barked, pulling Maren with him. A crossbow bolt sliced through the air where her head had been a heartbeat earlier, embedding into the tree behind them with a violent thunk. Maren gasped. Elias rolled, positioning himself between her and the tree line while reaching for his rifle. Two shapes emerged from behind the pine's dark coats, hoods low, movement silent. The Brotherhood. Not the Watchers from before. These men were here to capture. Another bolt hissed through the dusk. Elias fired first, instinct guiding his aim. The shot cracked through the valley. One figure dropped, crumpling into the snow. The second dove behind a fallen log. Run? Elias hissed. I can't, Maren breathed. That was the truth. She could barely stand, let alone flee. Elias gritted his teeth. He'd prepared for pursuit, not an ambush so soon. The Brotherhood rarely broke pattern. They stalked until night. They preferred control, not risk. Why attack early? Unless someone had disobeyed orders eager to claim Maren before. Garrow arrived. The thought made Elias's stomach twist. He reloaded. Movement sharp and steady. The hidden attacker shifted. Elias listened carefully. Snow settling. Pine needles shifting. A held breath. He fired again. A muffled gasp followed. A body slumped. Silence reclaimed the woods. But Elias didn't relax. He scanned every shadow, every branch. There'll be more. Maren pressed a trembling hand to her throat. Fear sharpened her features until she looked almost unrecognizable, eyes wide, breath unsteady. Why? Why didn't they kill me? They had a clear shot. They weren't aiming to kill. Maren's face paled. They want me alive. Not for long, Elias muttered. He grabbed the fallen attacker's cloak and threw it over Maren's shoulders. We have to move now. There'll be scouts behind them. Maren nodded, though her legs wobbled beneath her. Elias steadied her again and helped her forward. Behind them, distant whistles echoed through the trees, sharp, coordinated. Communication signals. 2 short blasts. 1 long. The Brotherhood's language. Maren stiffened. That means regroup. And regrouping means a second wave, Elias said grimly. They hurried toward the trapper's tunnel, an old, half-collapsed passage built decades ago by fur hunters. It cut straight through the ridge, opening into a narrow ravine on the other side, a perfect escape route if they reached it in time. Twigs snapped behind them. Then the unmistakable sound of multiple footsteps approached from both sides. Elias froze, listening. Maren clutched his coat, breath hitching. They're flanking us, she whispered. Elias's mind raced. The tunnel was still 40 yards away, open ground with no cover. Running now would make them silhouettes against the snow. They're trying to hurt us, he muttered. Like prey, Marin's voice trembled. "What do we do?" Elias lifted his rifle, jaw set. His heartbeat slowed. Senses sharpening. We hold them long enough to break through. The forest around them darkened as the Brotherhood closed in, and Elias' heart braced himself for the first true fight of the night. They left the cabin just as the last streaks of daylight bled into gray. Elias supported most of Marin's weight, her arms slung over his shoulder as they navigated the narrow path snaking behind the outpost. The snow was thin here, softened by the warmth from the rock face, making their tracks lighter, harder to follow. But the Brotherhood didn't need tracks. They needed only patience. Marin stumbled as they rounded the bend, and Elias tightened his hold. "Steady." I'm trying," she whispered, breath fogging in faint bursts. Fever clung to her like a second skin, stealing strength faster than the cold ever could. Elias paused long enough to check her forehead. Hot, too hot. He had medicine, but nothing to break an infection this severe. They had to move. The longer they lingered, the less her chances became. "Only a little farther," he said. "Once we reach the old trapper's tunnel, they'll lose sight of us." Marin nodded weakly. They continued slowly, quietly, then the woods exhaled, a sound like snow sliding off a branch. Soft, delicate, almost harmless. Elias knew better. Down. He barked, pulling Marin with him. A crossbow bolt sliced through the air where her head had been a heartbeat earlier, embedding into the tree behind them with a violent thunk. Marin gasped. Elias rolled, positioning himself between her and the tree line while reaching for his rifle. Two shapes emerged from behind the pine's dark coats, hoods low, movement silent. The Brotherhood, not the Watchers from before. These men were here to capture. Another bolt hissed through the dusk. Elias fired first, instinct guiding his aim. The shot cracked through the valley. One figure dropped, crumpling into the snow. The second dove behind a fallen log. "Run?" Elias hissed. I can't," Marin breathed. That was the truth. She could barely stand, let alone flee. Elias gritted his teeth. He'd prepared for pursuit, not an ambush so soon. The Brotherhood rarely broke pattern. They stalked until night. They preferred control, not risk. Why attack early? Unless someone had disobeyed orders, eager to claim Marin before Garrow arrived. The thought made Elias's stomach twist. He reloaded, movement sharp and steady. The hidden attacker shifted. Elias listened carefully. Snow settling, pine needles shifting. A held breath. He fired again. A muffled gasp followed. A body slumped. Silence reclaimed the woods, but Elias didn't relax. He scanned every shadow, every branch. "There'll be more." Marin pressed a trembling hand to her throat. Fear sharpened her features until she looked almost unrecognizable, eyes wide, breath unsteady. Why didn't they kill me? They had a clear shot. They weren't aiming to kill. Marin's face paled. They want me alive. Not for long, Elias muttered. He grabbed the fallen attacker's cloak and threw it over Marin's shoulders. We have to move now. There'll be scouts behind them. Marin nodded, though her legs wobbled beneath her. Elias steadied her again and helped her forward. Behind them, distant whistles echoed through the trees, sharp, coordinated. Communication signals. 2 short blasts. 1 long, the Brotherhood's language. Marin stiffened. That means regroup. And regrouping means a second wave, Elias said grimly. They hurried toward the trapper's tunnel, an old, half-collapsed passage built decades ago by fur hunters. It cut straight through the ridge, opening into a narrow ravine on the other side. A perfect escape route if they reached it in time. Twigs snapped behind them. Then the unmistakable sound of multiple footsteps approached from both sides. Elias froze, listening. Marin clutched his coat, breath hitching. "They're flanking us," she whispered. Elias's mind raced. The tunnel was still 40 yards away, open ground with no cover. Running now would make them silhouettes against the snow. "They're trying to hurt us," he muttered. "Like prey." Marin's voice trembled. "What do we do?" Elias lifted his rifle, jaw set. His heartbeat slowed, senses sharpening. "We hold them long enough to break through." The forest around them darkened as the Brotherhood closed in, and Elias Hart braced himself for the first true fight of the night. By the time Elias and Marin reached the ridge's edge, night had fully swallowed the forest. A thick, whirling blizzard had begun, sending icy shards of snow into their eyes and numbing every exposed inch of skin. The wind howled through the pines like an army of ghosts, carrying with it the faint echo of distant hooves. Elias gritted his teeth, feeling the cold bite through his coat and gloves. But he had no intention of slowing down, not with Marin beside him, frail and feverish. They pressed forward, moving along a narrow ledge carved into the mountain's spine, where the snow lay uneven and treacherous. Each step was a negotiation with the frozen ground. One misstep could send them plunging hundreds of feet, down into the valley below. Marin leaned heavily on him, shivering despite the layers of clothing and the blanket he had wrapped around her. "They'll be tracking us," she whispered between teeth chattering so violently it was hard to understand. "I know," Elias said, voice low but firm. "But the blizzard helps us. They'll have trouble keeping up in this." She shivered again, clutching the brand on her side through the blanket. "It won't stop them. It never stops them." He kept moving, but his mind was racing. Garrow and the Brotherhood were not ordinary men. They were patient, calculating. They could wait in the storm for hours, watching, listening, until they found the perfect moment to strike. Elias knew this trek was as much a mental battle as a physical one. They had to stay ahead of the hunters without panicking, without showing fear. Hours passed, the blizzard growing more intense, snow coating their faces, freezing eyelashes into tiny crystalline daggers. Visibility dropped to mere feet, and the howling wind carried the illusion of movement in every shadow. Each time a tree, branch snapped or a distant howl reached their ears, Marin flinched, gripping Elias as though he were the only anchor keeping her alive. Finally, they stumbled upon the entrance of a narrow ice cave hidden beneath an overhang, a remnant of glacial melt from decades past. It offered shelter, though barely enough room to sit upright. Elias helped Marin inside, pressing her against the cold stone wall for warmth. He dug through his pack and set a small lantern to burn, though the flickering light did little against the storm's fury. "You'll be safe here for a while," Elias said, brushing the snow from her hair. She nodded weakly, shivering so violently that it shook the entire frame of her body. He tightened the blanket around her, pulling it as close to her skin as he could without causing pain. Once she rested, Elias scanned the cave's opening, peering into the white tempest beyond. Through the storm, he thought he saw faint shapes, shadowed figures moving cautiously on the ridge. Scouts. Garrow's men were close, keeping the cave under surveillance while maintaining distance. "They're out there," he whispered, voice almost lost in the wind. Marin pressed her forehead to her knees. "They'll find us eventually," she said. "We'll be ready," Elias promised, voice steady. "You remember what you overheard? That plan you caught snippets of? It's still alive in your mind, and we're taking it with us to the fort. That information can save lives." Her hands tightened over his coat. "I'm so tired," she admitted. "I can't keep running forever." "You won't have to," he said, placing a hand firmly on her shoulder. "We fight smart. We use the storm, the terrain, and every ounce of endurance we've got. If we make it through tonight, we'll have a chance to stop them before they hurt anyone else." The blizzard raged around them, turning the world into a whirling wall of white. Yet inside the cave, A fragile but unbroken resolve began to take root. For the first time since the brand was burned into her flesh, Marin felt a spark of hope, fragile, flickering, but alive. Outside, the Brotherhood scouts pressed closer, patient and relentless. They would not give up, but neither would Elias Hart. The wind shrieked across Black Ridge Pass, carrying with it the icy sting of snow and the bitter taste of fear. Elias tightened his coat, rifle in one hand, Marin leaning heavily against him. The pass was narrow, cliffs on either side plunging into the frozen valley below. Every step they took was a negotiation with gravity and the storm. But retreat was no longer an option. Garrow and the Brotherhood were closing in, and the element of surprise was gone. Through the white haze, Elias spotted the first figures, dark shapes moving steadily along the ridge. Scouts. Then a second wave appeared, flanking from above. They had been anticipated, yet the tension in Elias's shoulders did not ease. One misstep and either he or Marin could be lost to the abyss. "They're surrounding us," Marin whispered, voice trembling. "Yes," Elias replied, scanning the terrain. "But they don't know the pass like we do. We'll use that." He guided her toward a narrow ledge jutting from the cliffside, hidden partially by snowdrifts. From here, he could funnel the attackers into the choke point, limiting their numbers. He set the rifle against the rock, sighting along the line of snow toward the first approach. "Stay low," he instructed. "Don't move unless I tell you." Marin nodded, gripping the blanket tightly around her fevered body. Her eyes darted nervously between the distant shapes, but Elias's calm presence anchored her. The first scout stumbled into the open, and Elias fired a single, precise shot. The man collapsed silently into the snow. Another moved forward. He had the advantage of numbers, but not the terrain. Elias fired again, then grabbed a fallen branch and flung it down the ledge. It tumbled and crashed into the snow below, scattering some of the attackers into disarray. Then Garrow emerged from the storm, his silhouette sharp against the white. A long coat, hood drawn, eyes cold. He moved with confidence, a predator fully aware that everything up to this point had been a game. "You've been a clever one, Hart." Garrow's voice cut through the wind. "But cleverness won't save her." "Or you," Elias shifted, keeping himself between Garrow and Marin. "You underestimate us." The two men clashed at the heart of the pass. Snow flew in violent gusts as they grappled, exchanged blows and dodged deadly swings of Garrow's long knife. Elias felt a chill creeping into his bones, but adrenaline drowned the cold. Every strike, every block was calculated, each one a battle for survival, for Marin. For himself, for the chance to end the Brotherhood's terror. Marin watched, frozen in fear but holding her ground. She could see the desperation in Elias's movements, the strain of protecting both of them while fighting a man who had spent a lifetime instilling fear. She understood then what it meant to survive, to endure even when the odds seemed insurmountable. Garrow lunged again, knife aimed for Elias's shoulder. Elias sidestepped and grabbed a loose rock, swinging it with all his strength. It struck Garrow's arm, forcing him back. Using the opening, Elias drove him toward the cliff edge. Snow shifted beneath Garrow's boots. A misstep, and the ground below would claim him. "You'll never win," Garrow hissed, gripping Elias's wrist. "Watch me," Elias replied. With a final push, Garrow teetered on the edge, his balance gone. He flailed, then plunged into the snow-packed ravine below, screaming as the wind swallowed him. The remaining scouts hesitated, shaken by their leader's fall. Elias seized the moment, firing once more and forcing the rest into retreat. The pass was clear, for now. He turned to Marin, who was leaning against the rock, pale and shaking but alive. "We're safe," he said, helping her stand fully. She clung to him for support, tears freezing on her cheeks. Is it really over? For tonight, Elias said. But we need to move. Garrow may have left men behind. We can't linger. Together, they descended from Black Ridge Pass, battered, exhausted, but alive. The storm raged on, but for the first time in days, they could see a glimmer of hope, the chance to survive, to warn the fort, and to reclaim what had been stolen from them. The snow had finally begun to ease as Elias and Marin reached the edge of the valley. Below Black Ridge Pass, dawn's first light struggled through the lingering storm clouds, casting pale gold across the frozen landscape. Every step they took carried the weight of exhaustion, but also a fragile sense of victory. The Brotherhood had been defeated here on the pass, but Elias knew that remnants of Garrow's men were still out there, patient, silent, waiting. They would not give up easily. Marin shivered as she walked beside him, the blanket barely enough to keep the chill from biting through her thin frame. Her fever had broken somewhat during the night, though the brand on her side still throbbed with pain. She glanced at Elias, who had been scanning the tree line constantly, rifle slung but ready at every step. For the first time, she allowed herself a faint smile, fragile but real. "You kept your word," she whispered. "You said I'd survive." Elias nodded, not looking at her immediately. "You helped yourself survive. I just made sure the rest of the world didn't interfere." She let out a quiet laugh, the sound almost lost to the wind. "It doesn't feel real yet. I've been running, hiding, thinking I'd never have a choice again. Now I'm standing here, alive, and we made it." They reached the main trail leading to Fort Harrow, the tall stone walls visible in the distance like a promise. Soldiers patrolled the gates, unaware of the storm that had raged beyond the ridge or of the chaos the Brotherhood had planned. Elias led her forward, careful to avoid drawing attention to her weakened state. The moment they entered the fort, he would ensure she received medical attention and that her knowledge of the Brotherhood's plans would be used to prevent disaster. Inside the walls, an officer noticed their approach. Elias quickly explained the situation, introducing Marin and the vital information she carried. Guards led them to a small medical infirmary while Elias detailed Garrow's plot, the infiltration of the supply caravan. The timing, the scouts still unaccounted for. Officers listened with a mixture of disbelief and urgency. Marin lay on the cot in the infirmary, exhausted but alive. Her eyes closed for a moment, then opened slowly. "So it's really over?" Elias crouched beside her. "For now, but the Brotherhood's influence isn't gone entirely. There are still men out there who will follow Garrow's orders." Her hand found his, gripping tightly. "Then we make sure they don't get another chance." He nodded, silently admiring her courage. "You've done more than survive. You've given them a chance to stop Garrow before he could destroy countless lives. That's bravery." Tears welled in her eyes, though she smiled. "I don't feel brave. I feel tired. But maybe, for the first time, I can feel like I belong somewhere." Elias studied her, seeing strength and resilience behind the weariness. "You do belong. You've earned that. And you don't have to run anymore." Outside, snow continued to fall lightly, dusting the fort with a quiet serenity that belied the violence and terror that had brought them here. The brand on Marin's skin would remain, a permanent reminder of the cruelty she had endured. But the story it told was changing, from one of possession and fear to survival and resistance. In the days that followed, Marin recovered fully under the fort's care. Her information helped fortify defenses, expose remaining Brotherhood cells, and prevent the attack that had been planned. Meanwhile, Elias and Marin remained close, their bond forged in fire, snow, and the struggle for survival. The past had left its mark, a brand on her side, memories of torment. The shadow of Garrow, but together they had faced it. The future, though uncertain, was theirs to claim. For the first time in years, Maren could finally breathe freely. And Elias, ever vigilant, could finally allow himself to hope. The frontier was harsh. It was unforgiving. But in the quiet aftermath of the storm, there was life. There was survival. There was the chance for a new beginning. And for Maren, it was the first she had ever known.